Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to potentially our last video on Shapes 2, at least in this Hexagonal series. We only have a final 2 side tasks to do. So this is our first one here, number 33, Frost Companion. Let's have a quick look at what this involves. We have some teal crystal on the bottom and 2 of the 3 shapes, hexagonal and gear. Looks like we'll just need 1 gear shape, as we have two pieces of 2. Whoops. Here and here, and then we have at least 1 full hexagonal shape, and then another 2 pieces up here as well, which would create at least, we'll at least need 2 to run that efficiently. So 2 hexagonal and 1 gear shape, and then some crystals and no flowers. But we are missing something, and it's these 2 little mysterious things on top here. These 2 little pins, which are usually fine, but now we have them on top of our shape. There is a bit of a trick to that indeed. I spent a good amount of time designing a pin converter, which I'll show you guys in just a moment before we start using it. That's the shape we want to make. Oh, and of course I forgot to mention the 2 yellow crystals on top. So unfortunately that means we can't just stick it in one crystal machine and be done with it. We need to do it 2 separate times. Okay, well, without further ado, let's jump into the pin making platforms. Now we're here at the blueprint station for the pins. There's a few different platforms to go through. I've tried to keep all of my working and label it so it's as easy as possible for you guys to follow along. I don't just want to show you the end result or show you someone else's even better design, because unless you're very familiar with the game and how everything works, it's just going to be confusing and overwhelming. I know that feeling all too well when I'm looking at these crazy efficient designs by others. It can take quite a while to wrap my head around what exactly is going on and how in the world they got there. So this is a step-by-step guide as to what I eventually built, and I suppose I should show you the end result here. That is the 2 2x1 platforms that converts 1 full belt into a mostly full out belt of pins using all 3 layers. So that's the end design there, but let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. That takes 1 full belt of shapes and converts it into 3/4 of a full belt, or 75%. But let's start with the very basics. Now, the great thing about this design is that it does not require crystals at all. This is just using shapes, and it can be any shape really, as long as it's a full one. So this first platform is simply using 1 belt, and it's showing you guys the very basic mechanics of this factory. So it splits, we're currently just splitting this belt in 2. 1 belt is having 3 pins put underneath, and one belt is just putting 1 pin underneath. From there, we're currently just destroying half of these shapes so that we end up with a shape like that. So it's got 4 layers on it, but half of it is missing. And then for the other side, that's probably an easy way to show you. It's just got 1 set of pins like so. So that goes on top of the other and drops down. So what happens with this is, if I have this running, that'll be easier to show you guys. So the top of that top shape is disappearing, and that's because the bottom shape already has 4 levels on it, but the bottom pins of the top shape are landing down where there's nothing on the left hand side, as you can see here. And the reason why that is happening is because, well, well, actually I'm not sure, because one could assume that the left half of the top shape, both of the levels, would fall down, but that just isn't the case. Only the bottom level does. So that's what happens. So that's the mechanic that we're going to use to our advantage. So anyway, as you can see from the output here, we have half of the shape that we want. These 3 pins here. And then we're going to continue to process that further. We're just splitting this output in 2 and then rotating one side, and then using 1 single swapper. So we have the end shape, the end goal shape that we're after, and on the other side, essentially a shape that we don't want, a quote-unquote discard shape. Oh, I'm finding it difficult to select it, but this is not usable in our final design. Now, of course, we don't need all 6 of the pins here, but if we can get a good stack up, we can always cut these apart and use them as we please for this design here, and as well as this final design here with those 2 pins. But this can be used in many different cases, so I do prefer to make them in large quantities and then use them later on as I please. So anyway, so this is the very basic design, like breaking down what exactly is going on and what mechanic we're using. Now we're moving on to increasing the flow through by adding extra lanes to the right for our top shape, and then for our bottom shape we're now using a cutter instead of a swapper, and then we're sending that half shape and feeding it back into our input lane so that they can be reused. So let's turn this baby on, and to do that, because all of this is full, so I've left it running for a while, if we remove this, it'll start up and it won't use or need that lane anymore. So that's only to begin with, to get that shape initially, but once it's in the system, it can feed back on itself indefinitely. So the same process is happening now. We just have more lanes, so it's theoretically not as slow, except we'd need more cutters, of course, to really speed things up. So instead of using the swapper, we now have to swap it down here with itself and splitting that up into. So that's a more efficient design in the sense that we're now just reusing the bottom part of the shape. In the next step here, I've just expanded the bottom section of that design so that it runs more quickly. So again, we shouldn't need this. Well, actually we do, because I haven't properly routed all of these. But if you were to take the output of all of those and connect them up, instead of trashing it like that, you'd have a closed system. You wouldn't need any new parts for the bottom, except for at the very beginning. So this is just expanding it so it runs more quickly, so it's not bottlenecked down here. And then this design is just another iteration of that previous one, where we're now routing all of the outputs, combining the bottom halves together to be fed back through. And I've also condensed the design a little. Now initially you'd have this running down like that as well, so that you could get the initial half points, but we don't need that anymore, which is why I've cut it off here. And that runs at a fairly good speed. This is always a good sign, having a uninterrupted input. So this is going at maximum speed and it's not stopping for any reason. And we should be getting roughly 75% of output here. No, sorry, I tell a lie, it's 50%, because we're only getting half a shape for each stack at the moment. Okay, hopefully you guys are all following along so far. I'm trying to take this slowly, so it's not all too overwhelming at once. Now this next platform, this is all the same design with just little iterations at a time. So we've reduced the size of the bottom piece here. You can see now that it's just a single shape stacked on pins, rather than having a whole half. Now what that means is, well, we're reducing the size of the bottom piece, but that also increases our output. So if we come here, we're now well above 50. Well, some of the time. This design is a little bit uneven, but it does have an increased throughput, because we're now creating 5 pins per stack that we can use rather than just the 3. So that's the next iteration. And then here I've just removed the stacker that was necessary previously. That's no longer the case here. And then just condensed it further. But unfortunately, even in this last iteration on this design, this still jams sometimes. So I started again. So over here, we have the next design. Same thing is going on. The pinned shape has just been condensed, and I think I swapped it around a bit. So this is still the base shape that goes underneath the stackers, and these go on top. Now this design certainly is a little bit different. We won't worry about that for now. we're doing an asymmetrical split. So we have the full bottom shape coming in, and then that's being cut here into 2 halves, rotated, and then cut again. So this lane only has a single piece, and this lane has a double. And the same thing is happening over on this side as well. A single and a double. And then they're being fed into the stackers here, with the same piece on top going into all 4. Now the brilliance of this design, and let me just say, I'm not the one who created this specific part. I borrowed that from another design, and let me just get the username up if I can find it. Alright, so I've found it. His name, at least on Discord, which is where I found that design from, is T Coma, so credit goes to him for that. He has an even more efficient design that's like connected, it's integrated into the miner itself, which is awesome, but it has wires and it's so condensed and convoluted. I didn't want to use it on this video series. I wanted to really take you guys through designing it from scratch and having a visible and relatively easy and understandable design. But credit where credit is due. This part is his. It's except his is, you know, at a different angle, and I think like has these cut out and has this condensed a bit more. Anyway, so that's that. Now back to the design itself. The brilliance of this design, there we go, that's where I was, is because these 2 lanes are different, when we swap them both, we end up with the full half of each. And that's really good, of course, because we can swap the 2 full half shapes to get a full shape and then a full set of pins here as well. And then that doubles back on itself and repeats the process. Comes in through here. So that's the new and improved design that really streamlines the process, needing only a few functions to get that full bottom shape back together and back to the start. Now this next platform has the same thing happening again. It's just been condensed a little bit, and that's probably more closely to G-Coma's design. Same thing is happening, it's just condensed, and I've added a second copy of it just below, and then of course mirrored that as well. So that is a fully functional, if you collect all 3 of these 2x1 platforms, that'll do all 3 layers here. 1, 2, 3, and then can potentially output them 1st, 2nd, and 3rd level. But I wasn't satisfied with that either. I was hoping that I could at least get it down to 2 2x1s. So I took this design and I was playing around with it, seeing if I could condense it further, taking advantage of the extra levels that were not being utilized. You see, it's a very flat design currently. So we've condensed this a little bit. I suppose we don't need that. So it's been squished vertically. But I thought we could do better again with the 3rd layer. And we've condensed it again so that it fits neatly in this little rectangle here. And it looks a bit confusing, I imagine, and convoluted now. Well, and that's because it is a bit convoluted and messy. But take my word for it that this design is the same as that design. So just the pinned shape on top, coming up to the stackers, and then this other lane coming in with the 3 pins, like so, to start off the machine, and then it's just being cut and fed into 4 separate stackers before the output gets processed into this shape and then the simple pins. So that's all happening in this squished little box here, and then that is being multiplied by 6, and then there's 4 platforms here, but the only thing that does is change the input and output. So this is multiplied, and this has a balanced input and output here. So it's as modular as possible. So it's going to be a bit hard to follow the flow here now, having all these things be on different levels. But let me see if I can make it as clear as possible. I'll come over here. Give me 1 second. Okay, let's give this explanation a crack. So this is just one of the 6 machines on a single platform. We have the input coming in here, and then it's traveling up and across like so. It's also going up initially and going across on that platform there, and that was creating the bottom shape here at the end, and then that was going back down, being processed a bit more underneath here, and then down again and across and underneath to get into these stackers, and then there's a couple more over on the left side as well. So the top shape here was being brought down, and then on the top part of these stackers across like so, and then the final pin result after the stackers, it was being the output of the stackers was being processed by a swapper on each side, with the resulting pin shapes coming through and down to the output, obviously not in the trash, and with the remainder of the bottom shapes that we want to reprocess, that's being brought up here onto the 3rd level, and then it comes around and swaps with itself, and then that produces a full shape here on the left, which is the same as this full shape up here at the end that was originally being produced, and then that gets brought back and fed through to the start again. It still looks a little bit messy, but I hope that helped at least somewhat. Let's go ahead and clear that. So here we have that shape, the other part of that process coming back along to then be brought back down, and then recut. And being cut, it comes down into the stacker here, like so. And then we have a pin shape, one extra pin shape as a result of combining that other thing, and then that comes to join the other two down here. Now this section up here is only necessary to start the machine. Once it's filled with the shapes, the bottom shape that it needs, it no longer needs that. So I've replaced this small section, and I have a blueprint for that goes along with the two platforms there. I've intentionally designed this machine to not require wires at all, in case you haven't unlocked it yet or something like that. So the important thing to witness here is the full throughput of this belt, which means it's not jamming at all. It's continually producing. There's no waiting or anything like that, and the output should be 75% on average with this shape here. So that's the final design, and this is just multiplied, and then some small details about the input for each platform, and then the output. So you're getting 37.5% of a full belt coming out of each of these platforms, which totals 75% here. We can get that running again. We just have a place for these pins to go to. Now it currently looks full, but that won't be completely full once it starts to run through again. But that's the design, guys. I hope that's all made sense. If any of you have any further clarifying questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments. But this will be the two platforms that we use for creating these last two side task shapes. So let's have a quick look at this shape again and just get an idea of the different types of patterns that we're going to need. So we have a two-piece, another two-piece, but opposite, a four-piece, and then another two separate two pieces here. So let's have a look at our blueprints. Doesn't look like we'll need that, but we'll definitely need at least one of these. But, well, definitely more than one. We'll need one of those. And I think one of these as well for the four-piece. Now it is possible to use this for the four-piece, but because I'm going to need that, they're going to be different colors, and I'm going to need another two-piece of the same shape as well, so I prefer to use a combination of these rather than cutting it out like that. I think that's going to be a little bit more efficient, or at the very least simple. So that's what we have at the moment. Two-piece together, two-piece separately, and four-piece together. Now the first step, if we can, of course, is to paint. So we'll put those to the side. We don't really need the copies of the others at the moment. And let's go with painting. So we'll need two sets of hexagons. One is currently unpainted, but later on it will turn white right at the end, so that's good to keep in mind. And this other hexagon is going to be blue. And of course we'll need our paint platform. Which we can throw on like so. And then the blue, of course, only has 4. So we'll take that. Like so. And then we want to rotate it, because we want the gap at the bottom, which means 2 rotations clockwise. And there we go. Now for this other shape, we'll put in first of all, give ourselves a bit more room, because we're going to need gears at some point, but not the flower. Just to be safe, we'll put it all the way over here. Maybe we can put it up one as well. Now we do want paint eventually, but not right now. And that is going to be white, so we can get that set up for ourselves. Like so. And after it's gone through the painter, which will go here, we're going to want to cut it. And cut it in 2 different ways. So I believe this is the 2 together and the 2 opposite. And we'll just check that in a second. And we'll only need the 2 together at the moment, and we can bring that across to our other shape to combine it, but it's not currently in the right position for us. So let's rotate that, and I believe that we need to do it twice again. And of course we don't need all these extra little belts in the middle, but it's for visualization. Visualization. Yep. Anywho, we'll simply combine these 2 with a stacker. And it doesn't matter which is on top. Will it ever matter? No. I don't believe so. So let's throw those together. Whoops. And simply route them straight into the hub. So that should be that shape underway. Now we'd like to take a look at the second shape underneath here. So 2 yellow gears stuck together with a teal crystal underneath. I'm going to take a little bit of time to think. That teal is always going to be on the bottom, so we shouldn't have to worry about it ever breaking, needing to stack it on top of anything. We shouldn't need to cut it at all, so I think it's safe just to go ahead and design it. So we'll start by coloring the gear shape. So we'll get another painter module and throw that over here. And we want yellow, which you can bring across like so. And we want 2 pieces together, so we can just copy this whole thing. Just going to create a bridge. And we can copy. And after we've made the yellow gears, let's go ahead and make a crystallizer straight away. We got paint. And we're looking for teal here. If we use a bridge, you should be able to pipe it straight up like that. Alright, that's perfect. Now the next step, of course, is simply to combine these two. We want our left shape to be on top. So we'll grab this stacker here, throw that across, and we should start counting up for both of these. Now we've got our next shape here, just on top. 2 blue gear pieces and 2 uncolored diagonally opposing hexagonal pieces. That should not be too difficult. We are only using a third of this current lane of gear shapes with the design of this, not having any wastage. Oh, sorry, not of the paint, of this cutter. Sorry. We're not deleting or trashing anything. So I can quite easily borrow. Of course, I don't want it there. From this without affecting this line at all. And we want blue gears. So where is our blue paint currently? It's over here. Okay. If we tunnel, should be able to exit over here. So that's going to be our blue gears, and we want the same shape but a different rotation. So we'll just copy this blueprint so it's now cutting it into the shape we want. This first stage is unlocked, so we'll just go ahead and delete that line so that that's all being funneled into the stacker instead. Now we want this rotated up the top, which would require a 60-degree counterclockwise rotation for the blue gear piece. And last but not least, we have the 2 uncolored hexagonal pieces, which we've already put into place here using this blueprint. All we need to do is combine them both together. And of course, it seems to be a running theme, we are running out of space again. Now, I do prefer having these little extra lines in for readability, not just for you guys, but also for myself. It makes it very easy to see what's going on. So if for whatever reason you're following along in terms of like taking inspiration, copying, whatever, I would suggest moving both of these train lines like back here maybe, and then the painting back to the left a bit, just so you have a little bit more room, particularly the shapes one moving up more than anything. That might be okay to stay where it is. In any case, we can make it work. It's just a bit of unnecessary spaghetti. Enough rambling, let's jump into our next stacking. And then of course we want this shape that we're making now to be stacked on top of that, which is a little difficult. We transfer this over. One to the left. No. Yes. And then we want the right lane on top. Like so. I mean, that'll work, but we haven't finished this shape yet. So just gonna put that over there. Right. Now here comes another complication. So we've got that next stage complete, which means we can shift this in. And then after that is done, which should be this shape here, it then wants us to crystallize that third layer on top with yellow. So let's grab the crystallizer. Let's give us a little bit of room here. So the output from there is going to come up here. We could even have that move straight away. And I'm hoping we can get yellow into here somehow. And then from there, back into the hub. Let me see if I can work that spaghetti out. Okay, so the yellow line is into the crystallizer, and we've just started making that shape. Hopefully it is correct. We should see that counting up soon if it is. I've also gone ahead and taken the liberty of increasing our yellow supply by adding a second color mixer in. So now we should be starting to double our supply here, which should definitely keep us running. Once we've finished counting up on this shape, we can alter that belt so it only goes left and doesn't also go straight down. Perfect. And last but not least, it wants those two little beady eyes on top, which, since we've painstakingly gone through creating our own pin blueprint, is now going to be quite easy indeed. So, oh yeah, and of course, those little uncolored triangles here and here are of course white now. But that's a simple solution, as we've discussed before. But we don't need that yet, of course. Let's get these pins set up. Now, of course, I haven't made it easy with myself with the white throughput. So let's change that up just a bit. Now we can take from the flowers take that out. And we're using the flowers because we don't need it for this shape at all. And we're looking for pins. And the pin shape converter balanced is what the blueprint is currently called. And that should leave us the full shape, full belt of pin, well, 3/4 full shape of pins. There. Now, one final thing that I didn't fully cover with this blueprint here is after it's initially processed some shapes, it does require one manual intervention, just the once, so that it can increase its efficiency and loop back on itself, which I'll show you in just a moment. But for now we're going to work out how to get, well, I suppose we don't need to work it out, do we? We already have a blueprint for that. This one here. So if we just shove that in, we should end up with that pattern of pins at the end. And then of course all we need to do with that is stack it on top of that final shape. It's just a matter of getting over there. That's a little bit of a problem. Nothing we can't handle, but it's going to be very ugly indeed. Okay, so we can see that it's now all locked up, and each of these bottom layers is completely full. And that's a good thing. This is expected to happen. This is kind of what happens without wires with this specific build. But there's an easy solution. So there's also another blueprint called the pin converter. Oh, I suppose I should get rid of that. There we go. So that's the big blueprint. And I can't spell loop. There we are. And the pin converter loop. So this will now start it up and fix the stall. Now the top part of this blueprint is just so it's easy to align with the platform. And as you can see here, it's got 12 in total little belts that, and what they're doing is replacing this very small section. So rather than the line coming in from the input and creating the shape that we need for the bottom, we're now using this line on the side that comes from the output of this machine. So if I just put a belt like this, it's going to stop that line and start this line. So that's what that blueprint does. It just does it 12 times at once. So you line it up with the inputs and simply click, and all of them have been replaced, and it should start all 12 machines at once, and they should flow through seamlessly now, and you'll get the full 75% output rather than a reduced rate because of the shapes initially needed to be made. Wait, okay. Now we have the desired shape that we want on top, like so. Let's see if we can get it across. Alright, so this is very cursed, and I have routed it across to the left hand side. We've got our pins coming through here, and this is a left on top stacker that has just been put to the side because we still need to deliver these shapes. Now we've finally completed that stage, so we can unlock that, And as we said previously, change the routing of this belt so all of it goes into the crystallizer. And that's all that's done as well, because we had them both running in tandem. So we should very soon be able to start painting this shape white. I'm just checking our paint throughput and all seems to be fine. Nothing is running out. There's still plenty of everything, which is fantastic. That should, I think, eventually become 12 full belts. It's just taking a while to catch up with that full throughput there. And once we get that in, that should be it for shape 33. Next shape is complete. Let's take that out and throw the stacker in. Route the pins in and throw all of that into our hub. Now that's not going to be correct until we paint this hexagonal shape right up here. And that's going to do those two shapes, as you can see. This line then becomes those two. So it's going to be wrong for a while, but we'll eventually get it right, and we'll need to leave that running for quite some time. While we wait for that, this, I believe, is a milestone. Yes, but we're potentially going to need this section, so I might copy and paste this somewhere else. While I wait, I'll do that off camera, of course, and if I don't take too long with that, we might be able to start working on number 34 very soon. Okay, so that's done and dusted. Now, I've just gone ahead and pinned number 34. Now this last shape doesn't look too bad. And we need 1, 2, 3 different hexagon shapes, 2 of which are going to need to be yellow, and then 1 is going to be white. And then of course we have 2 pins here, which will only need a third of the pin shape, which is well within our 75%, which is 3/4 of a belt that we can make. But the steps prior to this, or the stages should I say, are a little bit different to this. This is deceptively easy. Let's get rid of all of that and have a look at the one before. Now all of a sudden we have 2 different layers of the red crystal, and of course with the pins on the very top. Interesting. Now, we do see that the pins have fallen onto that first shape on that last stage, but previously to that we have a lot of red crystal. Now we currently only have 2 hexagonal shapes available, but I think by the time we need the third, we could potentially borrow from here. We are currently only using a third of this third hexagonal belt. No, it does not do. Doesn't sound too weird. But first things first, let's make a very simple yellow hexagon. Got a yellow paint coming up here. And we can throw that straight into the hub. The second shape is going to be a white hexagon. No. Now we only need that shape, so we don't need to worry too much about blocking this off, although we do need to make pins. So maybe we at least give ourselves a little bit of room here so they can tunnel underneath if need be. So that'll colour that hexagon white. We'll need to cut it out, which we have a blueprint for. Right here. And we want to rotate that 60 degrees to the left, or counterclockwise, so the gap is now on top. And we can put that through a crystallizer. No, I tell a lie. We cannot, or should I say, should not do that. Because if we crystallize this shape before stacking it, it's just gonna break. So we need to stack this onto our yellow shape before we crystallize. And we want the white on top, which is a left on top. Like so. Oh, but that's not gonna... I could do this. And divert the yellow shape this way instead. Because we still need to process that. We can't just recombine them straight away. Because this is not crystallized yet. Still missing a piece. Whereas that can go on its merry way. We want the crystallizer with red. And now that that is the final second shape, we can recombine it to that output belt. Okay, so after the second shape is complete, we're looking for number 3. And that consists of another full shape of the red crystals. And 4 triangles of another yellow hexagon. So let's start with the easy hexagon. Which I'll put over here. I'm going to start borrowing from this now. Which will slow down this a little bit, but I'm not too concerned about that. I'm noticing we're using a lot of the hexagon in this last train station as well. So we could be shooting ourselves in the foot doing this last side task in tandem, but I can always temporarily pause it just to finish that if I need. So anyway, we've got the full yellow shape that we want, just the 4. Like so. We'll rotate it into the same orientation as the white. I could have just copied this whole thing. And this is where it gets a bit interesting. So we want a full crystallized hexagon underneath. What happens to pins when they're put through a crystallizer? They act as a gap and they turn into crystals. So what we could do is get ourselves a pin shape as a placeholder and stack these bad boys on top. Let's go ahead and do that. Put the pin converter here, and we'll just use this flower shape. Bring it in, like so. And then we want the left belt to be stacked on the right here. We'll throw that in, and you should end up with this on top of pins. Well, hold on a second. Yeah, actually, no, that's good. I was gonna say, why don't I just use a pin platform? The only issue with that, of course, is it will not pin the 2 top segments of this shape here. So it'll have a pin underneath each of these, but it will not have a pin here or here. And we need both of those, of course, because we want that whole crystal shape underneath. Ooh, very messy. I clearly failed kindergarten. Anyway, we want the full crystal shape underneath this yellow portion here. Blah. Okay, just gotta stop that. Alright, that's why we're not just using a pin pusher, otherwise that would be the easy way to go about that. Might as well just show you it here. But with using a stacker with a full pin shape underneath, we of course get exactly what we want. What is this? As I was trying to illustrate, we're missing those 2 pins. Now we've finally finished with that second last side task. We can unlock that by I suppose we should go through it, and I will in just a second. But I think I'm just realizing now that Houston, I think we have a problem. We can't stack those 2 together, and I'll tell you guys why. If we put this whole shape into a crystallizer, it's going to crystallize the bottom, of course, which is what we want, but it's also going to crystallize this second layer up here, which, as we can clearly see, is not the case here. That is empty. So I've done that wrong. My apologies. We do still need this, but it cannot be combined with that. It's its own separate thing. We'll need to put the crystals on top of this shape before running it through the crystallizer, and then we add this final top piece. So we've finished with that shape here, so we can get rid of the diversion. We should also throw all of this down a little bit. We don't need it out. We also do want it down. Maybe once more even. Okay. So yes. And yes, that's good. Yes, of course. So this is stalled. Let's throw the loop in. And we shouldn't need to touch that again. And we want these pins to be on top of that. This comes down and joins in after that's all complete. But why don't we let that run through before we do any adding of the pins, so we can finish off this count here. And while we do that, we'll have a final overview of the previous shape. All right. Using all three shapes, but the flowers only for the creating pins. We have the blue hexagon coming through, cutting two pieces out of it, rotating, and then combining with two white pieces of another hexagon line, which comes from a different train unloader. That is not part of the blueprint, so don't worry about that. We also have a gear shape being split in two, colouring it two different colours, yellow and a blue. The middle one, 4 pieces are being cut out, then it's being rotated and fed into a crystallizer, which results in this shape here. That is then being combined with the output of that stacker we just covered, which is then immediately being combined with this shape. Now that shape is simply consisting of a two piece, a blue and a white, one opposite and one stuck together, which is then being fed into, let's clear that up because that's not exactly accurate. That's being fed into another crystallizer, which simply adds 2 yellow crystals on the top here, filling in that gap. After all that is done, the final stage, of course, is to add the pins right on top, just with this simple stacker. And we need to do this last because if we added them before that, they would then be filled with the yellow solidified paint, creating an additional 2 yellow crystals on the very top, which is not what we want. End up looking like that. Okay. Oh yes, and I suppose I should cover the the pin blueprint. So we're using the flower shape here. We're converting to pins and then cutting those up into the respective shape and then combine that all. And it's nowhere near full 12 belts, but that's because we have supply issues at the moment, I think. It was not always like that. Let's see. Let's see if I can find it off camera. Yes, so it was definitely this lane. So we did not have hexagons for a little while, but that should, provided you have enough shapes in your train unloaders, that should be producing full 12. Anyway, that's the overview of that second last shape. Let's go ahead and clean all of this up. Bonk. And while I was explaining that, we've finished this next stage. So now we want to add the pins and the extra yellow shape. Let's go ahead and do that. Let's add another stacker on top before being fed into the crystallizer. And then after that is complete, we want another stacker on top, only this time it's going to be here. Let's take a look at the final shape here. Just gotta wait for the pins to come on here, which should be coming through now. I see a problem. That's not going to be outputting what we want. Oh, yes it is. Never mind. All part of the plan. So we see here that that's the end result of stacking those pins on top. The top two fall down onto that first layer. So one might expect only those top 4 pins will be crystallized, but I suppose because it counts as an unfinished shape, there is technically a gap on top. So that also gets filled in with crystals, creating a shape like so. I'll take it, because that's what we need. And then, of course, finally, after we've completed that shape, we now have the yellow topper being stacked on top. And that's that. That should eventually be producing full belts. We'll come back to that in a moment. After that, the only final 2 little pieces for this next stage is simply more pins. Now I believe we're already maxing out our usage here, and indeed we are. We actually need a full belt of pins, but we only have 75%, so what we could do is this. So we'll take that in, and then we'll take this one and do the same thing on the left. Now we could even borrow some from here and add to this lane. So that should then be a full 100% full belt, while also using the remainder of these pins and creating that shape. So 2 pieces stuck together we have that, of course. And that'll be to the side, so we need to rotate it counterclockwise. We could even push all of this up at least one. Now that's currently stalled, of course. We can fix with this. Now, you may be thinking, oh, that's a little bit annoying having to adjust it all the time. And that is correct. However, why is it still stalled? What's going on? Anyway, I was going to say, this can be fixed with wires. Once you unlock it, I'll likely work on a blueprint for that in the near future. But I just wanted to make this as accessible as possible. Now let's quickly troubleshoot what's going on. What have I done? What? Oh, right. Okay, so I just copied this blueprint instead of pasting the original one. It needs to start up first. So you need that blueprint, and then once it's started up, then I can put the loops in. Okay. Anywho. The two final pins on this lane can actually be stacked onto this shape before that shape then gets stacked onto this one. So to remind ourselves to do that, we can put a stacker just here, which would go into these two squares, like so, just not yet. Now that that pin has jammed up again, let's go ahead and fix it with the loop. And this should be effectively done. And the only difference between this stage and the next, I believe, are those pins. So let's throw them in here. Pardon me. Everything else should remain the same, so we can leave that to run as is. Now, if we simply... what we could do is cut it, I think. If we did that, and then we just need to recombine it, which can possibly be done with that blueprint, where we quote unquote swap halves. No, we probably want a stacker actually. I don't want to swap per se. Although, yeah, let's try it. See what that does. That does look like it's going to produce the shape that we want, even if we need a different blueprint. Because by cutting it in half, we've removed all of the crystals, because that breaks. And we've just combine the shape back together again. And throw the back in the line, that should be done. Now, of course, we could also just delete all of that and all of this and simply stack that on top of this, and that should result in the same, sorry, stack this on top of that, and that should result in the same as this. So we're being really inefficient with our paint here. Not that that matters a whole lot, because we have plenty of it. And a bit inefficient with our shapes as well, if we do it this way. But I just wanted to show you guys that it is certainly possible to get from that 4th shape to the 5th one just by cutting this in half and recombining it. Let's get a close-up on what happens here. So all the shapes and pieces on top of the crystals simply fall down onto the shapes underneath when the crystal gets destroyed. Okay, we don't need that now. And I think I'd prefer to conserve shapes and paints. Oh, you know what? I really don't mind. I'm going to have to leave them both run for a while. That's basically it. This is the... It requires more of an elaborate setup for the 4th rather than the 5th. So it's probably better if I take you through the 4th one instead. Of course, I'm creating yellow hexagon here, white hexagon here before cutting 2 pieces out and rotating, adding that together. We're also creating pins from a gears shape we're not using, and we're doing that twice, one from the flower and one from the gears. We're sending some of that gear output over to this gear output because that is currently only 75% and it's now 100% filled with the belt here. And then this is at a reduced rate, but this only takes up 1/3 of one belt. So that's still maxing out. We now have a full belt here. We should, and indeed we do, of those 2 little pieces. So that's totally fine to combine it up here. We have another yellow hexagon being painted yellow, of course. Rotated, added to these 2 pins. Those 2 pins then combining on top of the crystallized shape. So what goes into that crystallized shape is, of course, these 2 with the pins on top, looking like that. And resulting in this. And of course, I've just been over this. Anyway, that's a setup for the last side task, number 34, Crack the Mystery. And that's it, ladies and gentlemen. We have finally completed all of our side tasks. Now, just before we wrap up, I'll show you guys a quick snapshot between what we currently have set up. We did have this in here as to that as well, which I got rid of very recently, but we just using creating that final step here. That's one way to do it. But let me just show you how else you can do it, removing some of what we have here. So this is the snapshot we've got currently. And this is what we have now. So we've removed quite a lot here. We don't need the crystallizer at all, obviously. We've also gotten rid of that second pin converter and a stacker in here. And that should still be making the correct shape. Perfect. So if you want it to be a little bit more efficient, that's the way to do it. But that's it, ladies and gentlemen. That is all the milestones complete, all the side tasks complete. And we can finally go ahead and click this unlock button. Vortex certified. Well, congratulations, guys, if you've made it this far along. Don't know what that is. Suppose I'll find out in a second. But yeah, thank you so much, guys, for joining me. I hope you've enjoyed this journey together. I've certainly enjoyed your company. Having the thought to make videos and finish this series for you guys has really helped me stay motivated to complete all of this and to work through those harder sessions where I'm creating blueprints and all of that. I'll also be adding the pin blueprints into the description of this video if anyone wants to have a look or even use them themselves. But yeah, grateful for you all. I hope this has been helpful and enjoyable, and I hope you guys have a blessed week. And before we go, let's just check that final upgrade, which is might need to do some googling. 1 second. Okay, so I've just looked it up in the Discord, and the shape multiply is an automatic multiplier. Then the thing that it does is it automatically increases the number of shapes that you input into the vortex. So, for example, all these shapes here, I'm currently inputting 12 lanes. It'll turn those 12 lanes into 24 lanes. So they'll just count as double, and then it looks like you can upgrade that multiple times. So double, triple, quadruple, 5, 6, 7, potentially. Don't quote me on that. In any case, it just multiplies the input to the vortex. That's it. But apart from that, thanks again. Have a blessed week. Thanks for joining me. Until next time, bye for now.